Do you think Gonzalez is going to ruin the YouTube algorithm? Let's take a look. I got a content creator here that I think does a good job breaking it down. I'm gonna play devil's advocate just for the sake of doing it. You let us know what you think in the comments below.
That, like, I'm low on the YouTube totem pole. I don't get invited to too many things these days, but I was even invited to a group call with YouTube employees, other creators, creator-adjacent business people to inform us of what this is and ask if we wanted to be part of something called an amicus brief, which will...
All right, so we've got our first big legal word of the day, an amicus brief. What is it? It's to inform the court, right? So it's these experts, content creators, or think somebody in that industry that says, hey, court, let me tell you why. If you rule in favor of Gonzalez, this will be an absolutely terrible result. And meanwhile, you've got others on Gonzalez's side that are saying, look, court, if you rule with Google, then this is going to have terrible implications for consumers. In this particular case, what is Gonzalez versus Google about? Terrorists spreading information on different social media platforms, including YouTube, about doing very bad things to Westerners, like Americans. This entire lawsuit can be boiled down to something very finite. Terrorist groups using social media to spread extremist propaganda. What does that look like? Spreading material, fundraising, and recruiting new people using these terrible videos. And importantly, the lawsuit is alleging that social media companies knew for years that social media companies allegedly knew that these terrorist organizations were using their platforms to find new recruits, to find donations, and to spread this hate. I've got a copy of the complaint below. I'm going to give it away for free. Gonzalez versus Google. Take a look at the comment section below. The next thing I have for you is the petition before the Supreme Court. Also giving it away for free down in the comment section below. Essentially, is YouTube liable for pumping this information and recommending it to other consumers? Now that you know what the lawsuit's about and the petition in front of the Supreme Court's about, let's go back to our
Think of something like slander or libel. Say a newspaper publishes an article that accuses someone out there of doing terrible things, but those terrible things aren't actually true. Well, that person can sue for libel, and the newspaper is responsible for having published that article. The difference here, which is protected by Section 230, is if someone goes on YouTube and says a bunch of slanderous things about someone, it's not YouTube's fault. You can sue the person who made that video, but you can't sue YouTube for hosting that piece of content. It's a very similar concept to the DMCA, which I think more people here are probably familiar with, in that what the DMCA is to copyrighted content, Section 230 is to speech. There is an important carve-out here that is different from the DMCA, though, and that states that no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be held liable on account of any voluntary action taken in good faith to restrict access to or availability of material that the provider or users consider to be obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable, whether or not such material is constitutionally protected. Okay, this just means that sites are allowed to actually try to execute good faith moderation on the content that's posted to them. And as opposed to the DMCA, where if YouTube tries to be hands-on at all and says, oh, you can't post this on our site, they're no longer indemnified. They have to be totally hands-off. With Section 230, YouTube can make efforts to moderate really, really bad content via the community guidelines without still being held as a publisher or not being protected by Section 230 any longer. So, in summary, Section 230 means people post vile things to YouTube. YouTube can try to moderate it, but at the end of the day, it's not YouTube's fault. So now we can get into Gonzalez versus Google.
I think that's where we're gonna disagree. The lawsuit is not saying that YouTube pumped a couple of bad videos here or there. It's saying that for years, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube allowed for this atmosphere to go on. You had all of these different organizations that hate Americans, that hate Europeans, that are getting together. They're recruiting new people. They're finding money to do terrible acts. They're spreading this hate. That is what this lawsuit's about. It's not about one-off situations where, oops, YouTube made a really good faith effort and caught something. We're talking about years. Years. You're telling me that social media guidelines wouldn't have allowed for any of them to pick this up?
And despite the fact that YouTube and the internet's future hangs in the balance, it is an interesting question to ponder, and at the center of it is the algorithm, which we love to talk about here, right? The specific instance that actually brought about this case, ironically, I don't think I can even mention by name, because this video will probably end up being suppressed, which means that the content moderation systems are probably working, I guess. So I have to kind of speak about it cryptically. So what's alleged here is that the YouTube algorithm served up radical, if you say yes, yes in Spanish and then reverse the words, radical that videos, which ended up contributing to the radicalization of viewers and then potentially led to them doing very bad things. And so the case asks whether Section 230 still protects websites when the algorithm is recommending content to viewers. So even though it's a very specific instance that brought about the case in the first place, it has wide-reaching implications, which is usually the case for things that get heard by the Supreme Court.
I actually am a little bit concerned with the argument here, because the argument is, hey, we don't want Gonzalez to win because it will mess up the algorithm for everybody. Yet the content creator here can't even say the word. He's got to say CC in Spanish flipped around to tell us what it is. Why? Because the content will be suppressed. So why couldn't they do that before and after Gonzalez? Not following here.
Usually they are constitutional issues, and this is, in a way, a free speech issue. So will the court consider that a website, that YouTube recommending a piece of content to a viewer is an endorsement, is like a newspaper giving the okay to publish an article? Or will they see that almost all social media websites at this point, if not all of them, operate off of an algorithmic recommendation system, and to not give some sort of carve out there would more or less break the operations of all these websites? The scope of this is not even known, though. Like, where do you draw the line between what is considered algorithm and what is not? You might make the argument that videos recommended from channels you're not subscribed to on your homepage, maybe that's algorithm. Suggested videos to the side and bottom of the video you're watching, okay, maybe that's algorithm. But what about search results? If you're searching for something, you have to rank the content that shows up somehow. Is that also considered algorithm at that point? And I actually asked this in the call that I mentioned earlier, and I was told that there is precedent for Google search results to be protected. But again, even though this case is called Gonzalez versus Google, it is about YouTube. And so I'm sure that the defense will reference that, but I don't know that it's established precedent when it comes to YouTube search specifically. And so it's a very hard question to answer.
No, I actually disagree. I don't think that's much of a stretch. What they're saying is that if you Google something and it populates, well, that's distinct than recommending something. I think that's where the difference lies. Is it's not when you search something what the algorithm comes up with, it's what is the video or videos that is recommended by YouTube, that is recommended by social media.
This only applies, obviously, if the Supreme Court is thinking about ruling against Google here. But I guess that's why you're probably still here, is to find out what could actually happen if the court rules against Google on all counts. So, God forbid, let's envision a worst-case scenario here. We may not actually see immediate massive changes to YouTube. Because remember, this ruling wouldn't be, oh, the algorithm is now illegal, you can't make content recommendations. It would be that by making these content recommendations to viewers, you may now be held liable for what they've uploaded.
I don't think that this is the case at all. You could say the same thing. Amazon's liable for fencing stolen goods. I think that the test is going to be reasonable. Did they have a reasonable amount of time to remove it, censor it, quash the content? And if they didn't do it, that's when they'll be held liable. What I disagree with here is it's not going to be one or the other. It's not, hey, we can't do any algorithm, or hey, we can't do it all. What's going to happen is these social media companies will have to spend more money and more time in moderation, which will cut into their bottom line. That's why they dislike it. This is not going to prevent them from being able to push videos. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think what's going to come down to, it's not going to be, hey, this bad company uploaded a bad video and then YouTube referred it to someone else and boom, violation. I don't think it's going to be like that at all. I think it would be they uploaded a bad video and YouTube has X amount of time to get rid of it, to quash it, to censor it, or they may be liable if they continue to pump it out. We're gonna have to wait and see what SCOTUS believes. I'm pretty sure the court on this one is gonna rule in favor of Google. Not a weatherman, but I can tell which way the wind's blowing. I like Captain's breakdown. He does a really good job of explaining what's going on. I like the fact that he was part of the amicus brief. That shows obviously he's a serious creator and that he's been asked by at least one group to join in. And he makes a good point. For the greater good of content creation, we have to keep the algorithm running smoothly. And if, a couple of bad eggs get through the grate, well, don't worry about it, because for the greater good of content creation, that's just, a casualty. On the other hand, it's, hey, we have to tweak the algorithm to make sure these bad eggs aren't getting through, but content creators may suffer. It is a balancing act. I don't know if there is a right or wrong answer, but I'd love to hear if you have a comment below. Subscribe to my channel. I'm gonna follow the SCOTUS argument, Supreme Court, and I might even go through the oral argument a little bit so we can listen to what the lawyers are saying and talk about some of that.